A book lover discovers a hidden library where each book contains the soul of someone who has died, but there's a price for borrowing them. Sana was a devoted bibliophile, the kind of person who found comfort in the scent of old pages and the whisper of turning paper. Her weekends were spent scouring flea markets, thrift stores, and abandoned buildings for forgotten novel. One rainy afternoon, she found herself wandering through the forgotten part of town, where crumbling buildings stood like skeletons of the past. That's when she saw it. A narrow alley she'd never noticed before, leading to a stone archway hidden behind ivy and decay. Drawn by curiosity and that instinct all book lovers share, she pushed open a rusted iron door and stepped inside. What greeted her wasn't dust and emptiness, but a grand hallway lit by dim candlelight. The walls were lined from floor to ceiling with bookshelves. At the far end, a sign carved in black wood read, "The Library of Lost Souls." Sana moved deeper into the library, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The air was thick with an earthy scent, not unpleasant, but oddly intimate. As she ran her fingers along the spines of the books, she froze. The covers weren't leather. They were smoother, paler, almost fleshy. Her stomach turned as she looked closer. Each book was bound in human skin, tattooed with faded names and strange symbols. The titles weren't printed, but scratched in with what looked like fingernails. She should have turned and run, but the pull of the place was magnetic. The books vibrated with something unseen, something alive. A grand desk stood in the center of the room, behind which sat a man with hollow eyes and a voice like parchment scraping stone. "Welcome, reader," he said. "Here, every soul has a story, and every story must be read." The man, who called himself the Keeper, explained the library's dark truth. Each book housed the essence of a person who had died, their memories, emotions, regrets, and secrets sealed into pages inked in their blood. Sana opened one gently, trembling. The first page pulsed faintly with warmth. Words began to swirl on the paper, rearranging themselves into a diary entry. The voice of a young soldier filled her head, speaking of war, love, and betrayal. She snapped the book shut in shock, gasping. "That was his soul," the Keeper said. "Each book you open, you invite a soul to speak again." Sana couldn't believe it. The idea was horrifying, but also deeply compelling. Who were these people? What stories had the world forgotten? Despite the grim surroundings, she felt the familiar itch of curiosity, the hunger to read, to know, to experience. As Sana wandered between the towering shelves, the silence was broken by soft whispers. Not wind or creaking wood, but voices. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Faint, pleading, each one whispering their name, their story, their pain. "Read me. I was innocent. I must be remembered. She lied about me. Dante let me fade." The books trembled slightly as though desperate to leap into her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest, both from fear and fascination. Every step she took brought new voices, more whispers, stories clawing for attention. It was overwhelming, like being in a graveyard where every tomb begged to be opened. She picked up one book. It was unusually warm, the name etched into the skin reading Mira K. 1943. The moment her fingers touched the cover, the whisper became a scream of joy in her mind. "Thank you," it said. Sana took the book to a corner lit by a flickering candle and began to read. Mira's story poured from the pages. A young woman in Nazi-occupied France, caught in a web of espionage, betrayal, and forbidden love. Sana was lost in the world, as if she lived every moment with Mira. She cried, laughed, and trembled with her. When she finally closed the book, tears stained her cheeks. But something else was there too, a voice, Mira's, whispering softly in her thoughts, still alive, still present. The Keeper appeared. "You've borrowed a soul," he said gravely. "You carry her now." Sana nodded slowly, unable to speak. She wanted to read more, needed to. The hunger of a reader, now cursed with something deeper, connection. She selected another book and then another. Each time, the voice of the soul lingered, wrapping around her thoughts like ivy. With each book Sana read, the voices grew louder, more persistent. They didn't just speak, they influenced. Mira's voice guided her actions, made her crave cigarettes she never smoked, hum songs she'd never heard. Another book, that of a Victorian surgeon, brought a cold precision to her thoughts, calculating and detached. She caught herself muttering in languages she didn't know, dreaming memories that weren't hers. One day, she tried to write in her journal and realized she no longer remembered her own handwriting. Her personality was fading, overwritten by fragments of countless souls. She looked in the mirror and for a second saw not her own reflection, but the face of a child, the last soul she'd read. Panicked, she slammed the book shut, but the child's laughter echoed in her mind. The keeper warned her again, "The more you borrow, the less of you remains." But Sana couldn't stop. Each soul she read made her feel more alive, even as she faded. She felt the rage of a murdered woman, the sorrow of a betrayed father, the euphoria of a poet's final night. These experiences were addictive. Her own memories became harder to access. Her name, her real one, slipped from her tongue. Her reflection no longer looked familiar. She began speaking in different voices, sometimes male, sometimes elderly, sometimes foreign. Her thoughts were no longer her own, but a churning sea of other lives. The keeper watched silently, his face heavy with regret. "You are becoming a library yourself," he murmured. "A vessel for the dead." Sana screamed at him to stop it, to fix it, but he only shook his head. "You made the choice. Only you can decide what story you want to end with." Desperate to escape, Sana begged the keeper for a way out. He led her to a locked chamber deep beneath the library. Inside were altars, old tools, and hundreds of extinguished candles. "To release a soul, you must give it something equal," he said. "Memory for memory, pain for pain." Each book she opened could only be undone by sacrificing a part of herself. To free Mira, she had to give up her first love. To release the Victorian surgeon, she surrendered her favorite childhood memory. Piece by piece, she began the process, offering her past to free theirs. But the more she gave, the less of her remained. She started forgetting her parents' faces, her hometown, the smell of her grandmother's cooking. Her own life was dissolving into the mist of the stories she had read. And yet the books demanded more. The keeper watched her silently, as always, but this time with urgency. "There is a line," he said. "Once crossed, there is no Sana, no reader, only pages." She stood in front of the shelves, hands trembling. "What happens if I vanish?" she asked. "You become one of them," he said. "Your skin, your voice, your story, bound forever to these shelves." She turned to look at the books, once fascinating, now horrifying. How many were like her? How many had simply wanted to know? Her head throbbed with voices, hundreds, perhaps thousands. They chanted, begged, pleaded. "Stay with us. You belong here. Finish us." The choice clawed at her soul. Knowledge had a price, and she had nearly paid it all. She stood at the edge of a line she couldn't see but could feel. One more book, and she would never leave. Sana stood frozen between two lives, the one she barely remembered and the sea of stories she had drowned in. One final book remained in her hands. She stared at it. Her own name was carved into the cover. Trembling, she opened it and read the first line. It was the story of a girl who loved books, who fell into a trap of beauty and pain. Her story, her voice. With tears streaming down her face, she closed it gently. "No more," she whispered. She ran, past the shelves, past the keeper, through the dark corridor, and burst out of the library into the cold, gray light of morning. Behind her, the iron door vanished, but her mind wasn't quiet. The stories remained, echoes of lives once read. She never found the alley again, but sometimes, in her sleep, she still hears the whisper, "Read me." If you enjoyed the Library of Lost Souls, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more haunting tales every week. Comment below, would you borrow a Soul S story if it came at the cost of your own? Let us know. And remember, some stories aren't meant to be read.